Welcome, everyone. This is SatiSeva, Reimagining Recovery and Support. SatiSeva, those two words mean mindful service. And the SatiSeva idea endeavors to be of mindful service to ourselves and by extension to one another. Family members, friends, people in general who are recovering from whatever habit energy is arising in their lives at any time in their lives. And so this is a compilation of 16 mindfulness practices. Many of you know that Lo and I wrote a book and we've recently published it. It is available online on our website. And I am actually going to read from it today as an introduction to our theme for this month. This month, we're going to be exploring reducing violence. It's the 15th chapter, and it is one of 7 mind practices. And it is deeply inspired by the work of Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote 14 mindfulness trainings, and he called it the Order of Interbeing. And at that time that he wrote this was early on in the 60s. Vietnam was still enduring the ravages of war. And Thich Nhat Hanh was a monk, and he was a rural living monk and pretty isolated, but he saw the ravages of war and what was happening to Vietnamese people, villages all around them. And so he, as a monk, wanted to be of service to his countrymen and women. So he started helping to build wells, to gather water, food, rebuild villages, connect orphan children with safe adults, and so on and so on. But one of the things that he felt really devoted to was to make sure that he himself was not harboring any violence toward the people who were perpetrating this war. And so he spent a lot of time thinking about it, contemplating it. And when he had an opportunity to get together with 3 monastic people and 3 lay people to really put these practices into work, they practiced together for about 15 years before he published any of his work. And the main premise of this teaching was to turn an inward gaze and look at all the potentiality of violence lying in wait within. So I'd like to set an intention for our practice. And this is the one that popped up, and it reads, "May you stay open. May you stay open." One of the things that I'd like to encourage as a complement to being open is to see if within your own mind and heart you can broaden your definition of violence. I know when I was first working with this particular practice many, many years ago, the first time I encountered it, I was a little like, what? I'm not violent. I don't fight physically. I don't use weapons. I'm not much of a yeller. But as I started to practice and as I started to look more deeply, I began to allow space for a very strong inner antagonist to come through. And I spent a lot of time with this inner antagonist because there was an aspect to this part of my personality that was motivated by conditions of oppression. So, as a woman, there are certain conditions that I encountered of being dismissed, ignored, diminished, and so on. And so, in order to assert myself, to make my voice heard, to take up a little bit of space, to come to the table that I wasn't always invited to, I had to be a little antagonistic, or so I thought. And then that antagonism grew and got a little bit distorted. It got a little over applied. And so my antagonism actually started to take on some sharpness and some pointedness and barbs and thorns and prickles, which had the potentiality to cause harm, which indeed did cause harm, which is violence. This month, we're going to explore a practice that I created to help me work with those qualities of violence that I would rather not admit. We'll probably do this one on Sunday. And it's a very simple practice, and it begins with a mantra. I have the capacity to, or I have the capacity for violence. I have the capacity to be antagonistic. And as I started to practice this, there's no judgment here. It's just this neutral fact. And with it, I would partner unapologetically or not defensively. I have the capacity for kindness. I have the capacity to understand. Both of those qualities that seem in opposition actually make the whole of me. But because I have this propensity to hyper focus on only what I deem good and worthy, and I try to ignore or reject those things that I deem unworthy, icky, not so nice, I don't get to know those qualities. I fear those qualities. I'm threatened by them in myself and in others. And as a result, I react when those things arise, when those qualities come to the surface. I react in negative, predictable ways. Violence. So on Sunday, we'll play with I have the capacity to, but I at least wanted to plant that seed. Today, we're going to do something else, and we're going to focus on a quality that we've been discussing in Recovery Dharma on Wednesdays, and that is the reliance and the cultivation of patience. Today, I'd like to read from the SatiSeva book, the little chapter that I wrote about patience as it pertains to reducing violence. And I'd like to share with you all a bookmark, what I'm using as a bookmark. It was sent to me by our wonderful community member, whose name I probably shouldn't say. Can I say it, Lo? Probably shouldn't say. I'll mention it during the community share, but I'll at least show the picture. This is Mary Poppins, and it says faith, and on the back is typed, "You make it easy to trust." And for those of you who haven't heard the joke, somebody told me once that I'm the love child of Mary Poppins and Fred Rogers. So fun. All righty. So let's talk about patience. Let's explore patience as a quality to help us reduce violence, and maybe patience as a quality to help us recognize the many faces and facets of violence and how that potentiality lives in us, how it lives in me, and by extension, how it lives in others. Now, this is not a comparative game. This is not something that says, well, they're more violent than me. That may be true. And the truth is, violence is a quality within human beings, period, straight up. The severity, the degree varies, but we all have its capacity. And therefore, we all have a responsibility to understand it, to be curious about it, and to give it an opportunity for ventilation, light, healing. And this takes the quality of patience. Patience is an anchor and it is a guide for this practice. Take a deep breath, friends. Find in your body a posture that feels at ease. And if you're somebody that's taking notes, maybe just move your body ever so slightly, just make a little adjustment so that your hips are comfortable, your shoulders in a nice posture to right. Maybe roll your shoulders a couple of times. Check in with your ears. Check in with your mind. And let's breathe a little bit of spaciousness for patience to arrive. Patience. When we cultivate patience, we enhance our capacity to be still and present with ourselves and others. Patience helps decrease the violent habits of passive aggression, jumping to conclusions, and remaining stuck in neurotic biases and prejudices. Patience allows us to become more aligned with our integrity and our values. Patience supports clarity through our experiences. Patience reduces the violent effects of heated emotions like anger, which often stem from our inability to understand the complexity of a situation. It is said the Buddha encouraged intensive understanding of anger. He considered it to be one of the most pernicious mental defilements due to its destructive impact on social harmony. The Buddha taught, as I understand it, that behind feelings of anger lies an egotistical desire for things to be the way I think they need to be. I get angry because they're not. This alone is not the issue. Throughout this book, I have emphasized that problems arise because our reactions to the dissonance between the heart and mind, between what I feel and what I think. Common reactions include rigidity, tightness, resentment, and vindictiveness. Therein is the source of disharmony. I think of my mom, who did not know how to access her anger and frustration beyond channeling it into controlling what she could externally. She suffered deeply because no matter how much she cleaned the countertops, caulked the windows, and kept everything neat and tidy, she could not make my dad stop drinking. She coped better than a lot of people. My mom knew she couldn't change my dad, But that knowing wasn't enough to address her emotional arisings. She didn't know what to do in the variety of feeling realms, so she put that energy into healthy distractions that kept her grounded. There are plenty of people who know they can't control certain things, but feel too upset to engage skillfully. Again, this is so very human. There's a word that is used all the time, quite unconsciously, that has the potential to contribute to conditions of violence. It's 3 letters. It's so understated. It's the word but, B-U-T. The reason why I'm going to bring this word forward is because it's a negating word. And anytime we negate, we create the conditions. We may be contributing to conditions of violence. So it's a worthy word to examine. And it's a worthy thing to reimagine and try to rework in our language. For instance, very recently in my own life, I was in a situation with a loved one where I was really angry and frustrated and scared. And I have a propensity when I get scared, when I'm fearful and anxious, the way that my tone, my mind, my language, everything about me, it responds in anger. So I'm scared, but I sound mad. And I've really been working on this, but boy, recently with my loved one, I just gave myself lots of space and permission to really feel all of this completely. And what ensued was this combination of skillful and unskillful speech. What also happened was this incredible repair and working on boundaries. But in the moment, boundaries were not there, wise speech wasn't there. There was a whole lot of habit energy and impatience. And as I was engaging with my loved one and trying to practice patience and trying to stay open to understanding and come to the balaklohe and be with them and so forth, I found myself wanting to engage the word but. Yeah, I said that. And I didn't really mean it or anything, but yeah, I know I shouldn't have done that, but so common, right? So easy. And here's the thing about it is it's also true. I shouldn't have said it that way, but I was so pissed off. That is absolutely true and not the whole truth. What else is true? That's the instrument of peace we're practicing, friends. That's the instrument of peace I had to practice. And the funny thing, although it's actually kind of sad, is I created this instrument of peace and didn't practice it. So, friends, be patient, you know, have a little leniency here. This is hard work. And I feel very confident saying it because I created this for myself and I know how hard it is. We don't always get it right. And part of the practice of patience is to see that we're not getting it right. And it's not, but we're going to do better next time. Because that negates what I just said. I'm not always going to get it right. Period. That's a full stop statement. I'm not always going to get it right. And I am committed to learning from every single mistake. I am committing to put a light on those errors, put a light on the way I stumble and fumble the ball and pick myself up and keep going. I was so worried and angry at my loved one, and I acted unskillfully as a result. And I was able to take stock. I was able to take some time to see all of that, to look at all of that. And I was able to acknowledge the hurt and the harm. And I was able to offer myself some leniency. I'm allowed as a full human being to be angry and upended. It's going to happen. I'm going to allow myself some space to be that. Now the question is, how can I be in that space, feel all those things, and minimize the collateral damage? That's the practice. That's the invitation. That's the effort to reduce violence. We cannot get there if we don't look deeply and understand the mind, what it's thinking, what it's stuck on, the body. My body was, it was just on hyper alert. My heart was racing, my stomach was sick. I couldn't think straight. My feelings were all over the place. And in the moment of feeling all of that, I could not tell myself, Julia, darling, stop feeling this way, stop thinking this way. I couldn't. I had to lean into it in order to get through it on the other side. And I made a critical error. I allowed those thoughts and feelings to govern my reactivity. I did not shame myself. I did not make excuses. In the days that followed, and I was repairing with my loved one at the Balaklohe, I acknowledged the reactivity that was harmful, and I modeled, I'm giving myself some leniency for making mistakes, for not holding myself hostage to those mistakes so that I can learn from them. I'm not making excuses. I'm not offering rationale. I'm going to look deeply. And in this way, there's so much patience being cultivated. There's so much patience that is sort of behind and underneath the reactivity, supporting it very, very gently. It's almost like patience is sort of holding back clarity a little bit and dropping it into the situation in these little doses. And it unfolded over time. It's still unfolding, in fact. And the motivation behind all of this even more. So there's leniency and there's clarity that's supporting the patience, but supporting the leniency and clarity is something else. And that's called love and peace. And by reducing violence, by endeavoring to look deeply at our own behavior and our own habits, it is an enormous act of self love. And by extension, love to one another. And this is the light of peace. I'd like to take a few moments of silence. And I'd like you to visit a situation in your life where you were unskillful, you hurt someone's feelings, you lacked patience. The other person probably also was unskillful and lacked patience, but you're not doing their work. You're doing your work. So just look for you. And remember, when we say, but, I did those things, but they, we're negating all of the attention that we're trying to give ourselves and heal within. Remember, we're not doing anyone else's work. We're looking at ourselves. I did these things, and this person was also unskillful. I'm going to let them do their thing. They need to figure that out on their own. I'm going to come back to me. You can even use hand gestures. The minute you start thinking of the other person, put your hands on your heart, take one of your hands away and focus it on the other person. Yeah, they were this, that, and the other thing. Whoops. I'm going to bring my hand back to me. I'm working on reducing violence within me. But they were such an asshole and they did this, that, and the other thing. And I feel like such a victim and da, 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 da. Yep. That can be true, friends. And the truth is, I'm working on me. I'm reducing violence in me. Breathe, friends. Allow patience to be supported by clarity and leniency. Allow clarity and leniency to be supported by love. Enjoy this practice. friends. One of the most reliable companions and mirrors for working with violence and reducing the violence within us is nature. Nature has so many violent components. I mean, just look around at weather, for instance. And weather is dependent upon many, many conditions that come together. The tumultuous seas and the oceans and so forth. Many conditions come together. There are volcanic eruptions, many, many conditions that cause enormous violence and destruction. We are of nature itself. We are all part of this nature. And so it stands to reason that naturally and organically, based on the conditions, violence has the potentiality to erupt in me like a storm, like weather. However, when I understand these conditions, that's when I have the power to change the conditions and therefore change the potentiality for the destruction connected to violence. I may not be able to change the conditions that produce a tornado or a hurricane or a wildfire, but I can change the conditions if I am encountering those things to protect myself, to minimize the harm that is inflicted upon me. Likewise, I can understand the conditions so that in me, so that I inflict less harm. This is a practice, friends, of looking deeply at the conditions in our lives, not to make excuses, but to simply grow our awareness. What is happening? What's true? And there are many things that can be true, even opposing things, both can be true at the same time. And there's a deeper truth always happening. And that's what makes the instrument of peace. That's true. Not the whole truth. What else is true? Such a powerful source of light. Together as a community, I would invite you to bring your hands to the level of the heart. And let's breathe together. A very simple meditation, breathing meditation with some mantras that we can use as a reminder for this practice. Breathing in, I have the capacity to be violent. Breathing out, I vow to reduce violence within me. Breathing in, I'm going to grow my awareness around the negating word but. Breathing out by using the word and more often. Breathing in, I'm going to play with that. Breathing out, in the spirit of play, I'm going to smile. Breathing in, the action of smiling. Breathing out reduces violence. Breathing in, smiling, breathing out, peacemaking. Thank you, friends. All right. I'd like to bring us back just for a few minutes of integration. The mindfulness practice of reducing violence and working with patience as a guide, it takes time. So remembering that time is an ally. It's never too late to offer repair. It's never too late to go back to someone and say, you know, we had this interaction and I was unskillful. And I'd like to own that and share that with you. And I'd like to share with you a reflection on how this situation inspired me to do better, to be better. Thank you. I mean, imagine if we could have more of those conversations, right? And that's really what we're endeavoring to do. Remember, we keep wanting to reconnect and minimize the divisiveness in our nation, et cetera. And all of that's out here, and really it begins here. So one of my tricks, it's a little trick. It's a spiritual hack. Is when I think about the subtlety, the sort of sneaky way violence permeates so much of my life that I don't even think of it as violence. I've become so tolerant. I'm so adapted and habituated. There's an image I use and a question that I ask. So the image that I use are things in baby form, literal babies, puppies, kittens, very new plants, very fragile germinated seeds. And the question I ask myself is, would I treat that the way that I'm treating myself right now? Would I say this in this tone to that baby? Would I growl at a puppy or a kitten the way I'm growling to myself? Would I get physical with a baby the ways that I'm getting physical with myself? And by physical, I mean, it's not just any harm that we're doing to ourselves. It's all about, am I taking care? Am I nurturing myself? Am I resting when I need rest? Am I asking for help and reassurance? Am I opening myself up to those vulnerabilities? And if I'm not, can I be curious about that rather than get down on myself about it? So there I go again, not asking for help. That's a pretty violent tone to take with myself. And a more peacemaking tone is, I wonder why I'm engaging that habit energy of thinking I have to do it all alone. I wonder what that's all about. Is there someone in my life that I could reach out to for reassurance and help? These are ways that we can play with this practice. And this is a way that we can really use other life forms as guides of how we would treat them as mirrors for how we ought to be treating ourselves. Last but not least, I invite you to close your eyes and I mentioned that working with violence is recognizing nature, go to nature, see the natural organic manifestations of violence in nature. And there are all kinds of conditions that create it. And one of the ways that I work with feelings of being victimized, because I have been victimized, and it's why I've cultivated this antagonist. But that antagonist, it serves a purpose, but it serves less of a purpose than I want. And so I've had to cultivate different qualities to assert myself, to rise above things that I feel are oppressive in my life. And so the image that I have nurtured is a tree. And I'd like you to find a tree in your life. And I'd like you to really honor it as a companion and a guide. And here's why. When weather comes around of a really solid tree, you'll notice that aspects of the tree bend to the conditions, but the tree itself doesn't topple. That's the difference. So there are these supple, flexible parts of the tree, and there's also this solid, rigid, fixed, highly anchored part too. Together, that makes the whole of the tree. Together, that builds a solidity that enables it to weather pretty intense challenges. We are all, each of us, invited to create that kind of posture within our own beings. And to remember that within our own beings lives a profound mystery, just like the trees. Specifically, science cannot yet explain how a tree is able to siphon and extract water from the earth and distribute it throughout its entire being. It defies the laws of gravity and physics in all kinds of ways. They don't understand it. It remains a mystery. And I think that's so grand. So within you, just like our tree friends, the lungs of this planet, our kin, we have mystery about us too. Within the wholeness of us, we are sheltered by this mystery, friends. And I'd like to end our practice today with a gentle reminder and our intention. May you stay open. And in that openness, may you find the joy of suppleness and the empowerment and strength of being deeply rooted. The wholeness of you becomes an instrument of peace the world so desperately needs. Thank you so much for being here today practicing. Namaste. I love the dedication of merit. I really, really do. It's such a wonderful way to bless our time together. It's such a wonderful, for me anyway, it's like a little sip of right, I get to take all of this into my day. Sip from the sacred. Friends, your presence matters. And in your presence is all of your ancestors alive in you. All of their friends, all of their experiences, all of their encounters, all of that mysteriously coming together, manifesting, embodied in you, in this moment, in this presence. It is nothing short of miraculous. And then, like a blink, it can be gone. This precious human life. There is only one certainty, and that is that this precious human life will end. And we don't know when, and we don't know how. And so it ought to infuse our hearts and minds with a sense of urgency, not to get it right, not to perfect this life, but to do things a little bit differently. Perhaps do things enough differently to reduce harm in the world. Maybe that is enough. And so for just today, there's the word just. Let's not use that. So for today, let's endeavor, let's actually vow to reduce violence in the mind, in the heart, and in the spirit. And may that effort radiate like a sunbeam and a moonbeam. And may it find someone confused and lost. And may it land in their heart as a warm hug. And for a moment, may they know peace. We have the power to do that, friends. So let's do. See you next time. Namaste.